Thank you everyone for joining us this morning and for tuning in to Made in Singapore Data-Driven Smart Manufacturing presented by SGInnovate and General Assembly. I am Ziying from SGInnovate, and we are a government-owned organization that invests in and helps build deep tech startups that leverage science and technology to make lives better for all. A big part of our work is to build a global community of leaders and doers who are driving deep tech innovations such as AI, cybersecurity, medtech, quantum tech in our economy and society. Today, we have collaborated with our longtime partner, General Assembly, to bring an exciting panel of experts from HP Inc., Boston Consulting Group, Manufacturing Standard Committee, IBM Supply Chain, and Arcstone, where they'll be going in-depth into data-driven smart manufacturing. We would like this to be an interactive session, so if you have any questions, do post them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and do use the chat box to connect with our wider community. Now, let me just hand over the time to Hongwu from General Assembly to share more about the great work they are doing and the Made in Singapore series. Hongwu, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Ziying. And of course, thank you to SGInnovate as well for collaborating with us on this event. So my name is Hu and I'm the Marketing Manager for General Assembly Singapore. So for those of you who haven't heard of General Assembly before, we are a global tech education company, and we really focus on helping people to reskill and upskill themselves in the most in-demand tech skills. So be it coding, data, of course, being one of them. We also have courses in UX design, digital marketing, and product management as well. So you might be wondering what exactly is Made in Singapore. So I mean, on top of our courses and our workshops, we actually do have a very vibrant lineup of community events where we really bring everyone together for them to learn about what are the hot topics, what are the hot issues and the trends that are happening in the industry. And right now, everything is online, of course, and on top of standalone events, we also do have bigger event series that allow us to really drill down on a particular theme, a particular focus, and usually these run for 2 weeks, and Made in Singapore is one of them. So Made in Singapore is our annual, very well-loved series, and as the name suggests, it is indeed for us to celebrate all of the great people doing great things in our little red dot. So within the 2 weeks, we bring together the leaders, the founders, the CEOs behind some of Singapore's foremost homegrown brands in different industries. So today is going to be on manufacturing. And that's why we are so excited to be able to bring together such an amazing panel, all of whom you should be able to see on your screen right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a very quick introduction of them all as much as possible. Right, so first up, we have Ashwin, who is joining us from HP. So Ashwin leads the data science practice for HP Singapore. He has about 15 years of experience now, primarily in multinational companies. He really champions the use of data and analytics to solve business problems in manufacturing, in supply chain, marketing, and product development. Next up, we have Abik, who's joining us from the Boston Consulting Group. So Abik is the expert consultant for Industry 4.0 and digital transformation. So really, he has very deep expertise and experience in Industry 4.0 intelligent systems, so including everything from robotics to automation to self-learning software systems. So before this, he had also founded a couple of companies in the robotics space. He has also held top management positions in SMEs as well. So he'll be in the perfect position to advise you both on from the corporate side of things, but also on the smaller startup side of things as well. Next up we have Priyanka joining us from IBM. So Priyanka is the global leader for digital supply chain and also a senior technical staff member. So she leads the enterprise architecture for AI, automation, and web application on hybrid cloud. She has an increased focus on cybersecurity as well. So her role really includes data modernization journeys through enterprise data lake for supply chain applications. And last but not least, we have Brandon, who's joining us from the Standard Development Organization as the Manufacturing Standard Committee, the Deputy Chair of Manufacturing Standard Committee. So Brandon brings with him 25 years of industry experience. He covered everything from technical to consulting roles, sales and marketing, BD, and also in association work. So he brings really the best of the industry together to help enable companies to embrace these practices as their core DNA. And the whole session will be moderated by Wilson, who is the CEO of Arcstone. So Wilson is an industrial engineer by trade. He has implemented improvement projects in manufacturing industries, ranging from smart meters to gourmet chocolate to glass productions and pharmaceuticals. So he founded Arcstone in 2013, and he has been designing production simulation software for some of the world's largest biomanufacturers. So as I mentioned, it really started that panel, and I'm sure you'll be able to learn a lot from all of them. So now, without any further ado, I will pass over the time to Wilson to get us started on this discussion. Over to you, Wilson.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today as well. I'm really glad to have you all here to talk about Industry 4.0. Of course, a very interesting and important aspect to my passion and my interest, as just as we've described. I've spent a lot of time in the manufacturing space, and it's a wonderful, ever evolving area. So for those folks who are in industry that's sitting in today and looking at potential ideas and options of how to move forward in your digital journey, you have a lot of experts here that's going to be able to help us carry that forward. If you're in the space of looking at this as perhaps a career or an area to open up and innovate into a new organization to drive some of these changes in digital manufacturing and Industry 4.0, this is a great talk as well, because we're going to go through a lot of different things that's going to talk about different solutions and tools and areas that is lacking as well that the industry needs. And we're going to be able to see how we can fill those spots and where you can actually contribute as well. So let's get going and jump right in. I think when we talk about digital manufacturing and Industry 4.0, this isn't really something that was brand new. However, it was coined by the German government back in 2011. We're actually 10 years ahead now. We've progressed a decade after this whole Industry 4.0 kind of concept was brought to the world. But how has that really changed from that first time that it was opened up in 2011 versus what it is now? Has there been a significant difference? And to our panelists here, feel free to jump in and let us know. Has there been a big change from what it was before? And have we been able to realize some of that now? Versus was the government at the time thinking it was going to be a lot grander, or should we have progressed a lot more compared to what we're seeing in the market now?
I'll go first, Wilson, if that's fine.
Sure, go ahead.
I think in the last 10 years, what most of us have realized is what really powers this Industry 4.0 revolution. And for people who do not know, why is this the fourth revolution? I think that's also an interesting point. Like the first one was, of course, the steam engine. The second one was electricity. The third one was computers. And today we are talking about what is powering Industry 4.0, which is data. Mm-hmm. And regardless of what technologies we use, whether we talk about IoT or industrial Internet of Things, the main revolution or the things which is powering today's factories or today's manufacturing processes or even beyond that is actually data. And I think most organizations have realized that. I think in the first half of this 10 years or the first 5 years, a lot of people were talking about robotics, collaborative robotics, or 3D printing and how to use it, tinkering around with a lot of different technologies, and all of them have evolved in their own way. But I think the real value add and where people see real results or real, let's say, tangible outcomes is coming in from the fundamental of being able to analyze and generate insights from data. And I think that has been the biggest jump, in my opinion.
Sounds good. Sounds great. Any other panelists want to jump in here? Brendan,
Wilson,
sorry, let's go with Brendan first, and then we'll
Brendan,
okay,
sure.
Sorry.
So let me just chip in a little bit on what I see for the past 25 years. I think the whole ideas of using information to help to optimize the manufacturing has been started in the high-tech industry since the 90s, right? But then at that time, I think we are more focusing on internal optimization and looking at a case like the advanced process control, then simulation, scheduling, dispatching, this kind of area. What I see after 2011 is that people start to realize that actually there's a lot more things that you can gain from data, right? If you are only looking at data in the most native form, then you probably can only use the data for monitoring, right? Monitoring of the only silos application. But when you start to make the data available for others, then a lot of interesting scenario will come, right? So the direct one would be you allows the upstream and the downstream process to start planning according to what your current status is, right? And also, if you are putting this data together, then it will allow people who are in charge on the improvement to have a better insights on what are the events and the issue that can actually impact the overall situation. So then in this case, you can actually get yourself be more prepared, and it will open up a lot more options. Then along the ways for our technology providers, once they have a more information also from coming out from the manufacturing, then they will know exactly which are the area that can provide the bigger impact and the bigger value. And then therefore they can actually collaborate with the manufacturer to start doing something that are not just technology, but actually add value to the whole operation itself. So I think these are the main things that is happening. And I believe that people nowadays start to see the value of going together, right? So, and the process, I believe, is an iterative process. It will continue on and on and on until to the extent that everybody are involved in this whole new ecosystem. Yeah.
I think the word ecosystem is a very important one. We'll be coming back to that a little bit. But Priyanka, you had something to just say about the how Industry 4.0 has transitioned in the past decade. Please go ahead.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with the viewpoint of Brendan and Abhi here. So if you look at Industry 4.0 in general, and Abhi gave a very good explanation of the journey of Industry 4.0 itself, right? There's a different level of maturity in different geos, regions, and companies, right?
Absolutely.
And as much as there's an increased focus on data, I personally view that there are two other aspects that have changed. One is that in last 1.5 years, how supply chains have been disrupted. I think the organization have started to realize the importance of outside in data and outside in processes as well, right? Because now it's not just your enterprise data, your interconnected organizations, your ecosystem or suppliers, but there's so much happening in the macroeconomics that is impacting the organizations. That is one. Second is that with varied level of maturity, even if the organizations had progressed significantly in terms of the maturity level for Industries 4.0, at least, and I'm taking last 18 months, right? The companies are taking a relook at their process. So process engineering, re-engineering has come back significantly. Then what are some of the processes that they need to change to optimize operations within their own organization? Processes that are impacted by what's happening in our outside world, trade policy changes, pandemic, that the situation we are in. So these are two aspects that I see that has significantly changed when the concept of Industry 4.0 is looked at.
Absolutely.
So I'll just, I think a lot of the points were covered. So just add to that, right? The real data has been, people have been collecting data for a long time, and data has been available. The whole area of data science was kind of born maybe in the last 5 to 6 years. Previously, it was called statistics and analytics, and now we're calling it data science. And it's fundamentally the sophistication and the computation and algorithms that have evolved in the recent past. I mean, one big one is deep learning, the ability to use deep learning for some of these problems and be able to make decisions on the fly, right? So these have been around for a long time, but the computation has caught up to these techniques, which make these, which makes it possible for us to apply some of these. And it's just taken off in terms of the ability to process volumes of data and derive insights in real time with sophisticated algorithms. I think that's one big one that's enabled some of this.
I think, you know, we're coming to a consensus where I think back if we were looking into, say, 2011, the concept of Industry 4.0 was still a very pie in the sky, like a lot of different topics, 3D printing, AGVs, cobots, things, you know, completely lights out factories. And it's this kind of ultimate vision that we all want to reach to. And there was also a little bit of kind of a reckoning, a maturity, so to speak, as we've gone through the years to realize that, you know what, it's not going to be one big jump to get to there. It's going to be a steady progress. It's a transformative kind of journey that we need to go through. And different industries, different countries, different manufacturers are at varying degrees along that spectrum. Some are still at the very early stages of going and looking at, well, how do I get my paper-based operations into a digital form? Others that are already in a digital form that has some form of automation is now looking into, well, how do I better maintain my equipment and have actual predictive maintenance coming in and leveraging the data that I can get? And then there are the ones at the forefront that are looking at more advanced ways to do optimization, to look at the production change processes. And if there was anything that was perhaps the biggest shock to the system, was COVID. I think, Priyanka, just as we were mentioning, the past 18 months or so, in the past, post-COVID kind of situation, everything was thrown into chaos, especially from the manufacturing standpoint, where if you only had clarity inside of the four walls of your factory and had nothing else outside, you were probably in deep, deep trouble. And we've seen companies that were working and running very well, but once COVID hit, everyone was going to work, but then there was nothing to work on. Why? The supply chains completely broke down. It wasn't something that you would naturally have assumed that would be a big issue, because you've been focused so heavily on improving and optimizing your own shop floor, but then you forgot about what is happening outside. That could be a dramatic impact as well. So these are the things that we've seen, the maturity and the kind of the understanding of Industry 4.0 digital manufacturing no longer being an option. It is something that is a requirement that we have to move towards. So when on this topic of if it's now becoming a requirement, how do we actually go about starting this journey? So from Arcstone's context, we usually use a methodology called visibility first, then control, and then optimization. First of all, I need to see what's happening on the ground in real time. My systems, my operations, anything on paper and pencil needs to be fully moved into a digital framework. So data still is the underlying foundation that everything around Industry 4.0 sits on. When I see, then I can control, then I can apply predictive maintenance, I can apply better schedules for quality control processes, optimize for scheduling, and then move into the advanced optimization stage, which is to look at all this data I've collected over years and months, and then being able to provide better value. These three steps is something that we feel is easy to follow for a lot of manufacturers, especially depending on where they are on the journey. How would you feel in your own organizations and the work that you've been working and seeing with manufacturers? Is this the right three steps? Would you include something different? Would you change it? And where do you feel manufacturers are amongst the many that you've talked to so far, on average in Singapore? Where are they along this journey? Are they still very early stages, or are they really pushing towards kind of that further end of the envelope where they're bringing about brand new things so far? Or is there a lot of opportunity for growth?
I can go first, and
okay.
It's okay, Bennett.
Yeah, no worries. Please go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So I can share with my own experience from IBM. So IBM has been, and just in case if a lot of people are not familiar with, IBM has its own supply chain, and we have close to 5 manufacturing plants that are spread across the world, and we do have end-to-end operations for supply chain within IBM. So based on my own experience, I would extend what you said, which is visibility, control, and optimization. And I would extend that with that the organizations can start to look at disruptions instead of looking at what is going well in my organization end to end. Start handling the supply chain on a disruption basis. And I think that gives a very good ground for the organization to start looking at starting and also escalating their digital journey. So then you're looking at, I have a particular pain point, my supply issues, my shortages issue that I want to address first. Do I have all the required data within enterprise, outside of enterprise, from my ecosystem, from my suppliers? And that's a very, very, that has been one of the success factors for IBM's own supply chain transformation, that we have taken a business pain point approach, a use case approach, and we have taken this entire journey of even building our data in a very agile manner. So you build a use case, you implement, you solve the pain point, and then it's very much possible that when you have new data elements coming in, you go back and look at the relook at the use case on how you're going to extend it and make it more business value oriented for the users. So in summary, I completely agree that it's visibility, control, get control of your data, put the governance, put harmonization around your data, and then you look at optimization, but have it more in an agile manner. If we start to put our arms around the entire enterprise data and external data at one time, it's like boiling the ocean, which is just not going to be possible.
Yeah. The agile method, I think, is a very important one as well. I think we'll come back to that a little bit, because it's also about learning from the failure, right? The whole agile methodology allows you to iterate quickly. There's no such thing as a perfect solution or a one solution solves all kind of thing. It's going to need that iterative process. So we'll definitely come back to that. Brendan, you were about to say something too.
Yeah. So I would like to offer a little bit a different perspective from the small and medium-sized enterprise, because I have been with Singapore Manufacturing Federation as the chair for Smart Automation Industrial Group, and have a chance to actually talk to quite a number of SMEs. So what I actually observe in the SME space is that a lot of people are still not aware how data can help them. I think this is the fundamental issue. Okay, it is they are aware of the disruption that can happen on their supply chain, but they are not aware of how data can actually help them or impact them. So it actually become a important perspective for them to really understand how they can tap in this. Okay, a lot of them, they have a very little exposure on this area, and that's why the number of choice that they have are not much. So to me, I would like to offer a slightly different perspective to help them, right? So first, we start from discovery, right? How can we help the SME discover the kind of a process that can leverage on information, and what kind of KPI that they can achieve based on this kind of information? I think this is the first stage that they have to go through. After they go through this stage, then they should have the opportunity to really make use of some solution. So the ability to try to have a sandbox kind of environment to try on implementing some of their solution without committing a lot of the resources. I think this is also a very important part. If they do not have this kind of environments or resources, sometimes it become a showstopper for them. They don't know. They are very worried to start on this. So that's why I think the platform like the SGInnovate or some of the government's initiative is actually important for them to allow them to try on this, right? Then the third stage would be after they try on this, then they really need to pick up some of these so-called like the low-hanging fruit, and then really start to work on it, right? And become comfortable with this, right? And then the more they actually gain, the more means that the more kind of small cases they get success on, the more confidence that they will have. So it's usually a very big mistake to start something very big, and then after that they get so bogged down by it, and then eventually they roll back. Yeah, I saw this kind of a situation quite a number of times when they have carry out some for example the Siri assessment, and then they start to work on big things, based on some example that they saw. Then in that case, they actually get so overwhelmed by this, and then they become stay back, and they dare not to commit more. Then of course, if they have gained success, then they can use the so-called like the ROI from this success to continue to build up and become the mastery in this process. And then this way, it is much easier for them to follow the industry 4.0. Yeah. So I think this is the kind of things I observe. Thank you.
Fantastic. No, I think the 2 points that you've kind of reiterated again was that you're going to have to look at bite-sized components to be able to start. Trying to do a massive endeavor at the beginning may be very tricky, especially from the standpoint of the SME. One thing that I thought that you brought up was good to notice as well is that for a lot of the industry players that are sitting on this talk, if you haven't looked into the SIRI program or the SIRI index, the Smart Industry Readiness Index, it's actually a very easy way to do kind of the self-homework and self-assessment to see where you are in your organization. Where are the gaps and the pain points that you may be facing? And then identify these small projects to then roll out and to be able to scope and pursue. Because trying to do everything at once is going to be very tricky. But identifying and, for instance, putting into a Pareto chart your top to least kind of major pain points and tackling them one by one, you're much more likely to be able to be successful at that. And ArcStone actually has been pushing very heavily to actually move and support in these areas. ArcStone actually provides, for example, a lightweight, free manufacturing execution system to help people get started. The getting started part is the hardest part. And if you can dig your teeth and sink your teeth into going into a digital space at the beginning at no cost, and ideally at a way so that you can drag and drop and configure on your own, you're going to be in a lot better and much more comfortable stage. And so this is something where getting started is going to be key. But I'll open up again if other folks have some notes on the path and the process of going through.
Yep. So within HP, we do align with the visibility, but we call it a little differently. So we sort of say detect, diagnose, predict, and prescribe for manufacturing context. So visibility is more on detect. So can I detect things that happen on the floor faster, right? And of course, diagnose will be with the data. Can I give them tools for the experts to diagnose problems or root causes faster, right? So before they can actually even go control. So it's more detecting, finding the root cause, and then we go to the next level, which is called predict, which is can I now even predict some things, and then finally prescribe, which is basically even stop before the problem happens, right? So that's the way we go about. And in a lot of companies, what we have seen is people still are more on the detect or diagnose level. I mean, we do some more of predict and prescribe, but the majority of the companies who have started this journey are more on they want to know information in real time, so the subject matter experts can act accordingly. And the next icing on the cake is to be able to give them some more aid in terms of diagnosing and going and fixing the problems rather than go around search where the problem is coming from. So that's the way we look at too. And to adding to Brandon's point, the one of the tools we like in addition to the series Smart Manufacturing Readiness Index is just like industrial engineering had value stream mapping for a long time. There is a digital value stream mapping exercise where you start with your end. What's your business trying to accomplish, right? What's your key KPIs? And trying to work backwards to see where are the biggest pain points to that objective, and trying to see how digital can help you sort of address some of those pain points, right? Rather than just do digital for the sake of doing digital and figure out what the value is later, right? So that seems to be most companies started just let's go digital, but understanding the why needs to be critical.
Absolutely. I completely agree with Ashwin. And in fact, I think the starting point is, of course, of defining the end goals and objectives in mind. Whether do you want to increase productivity? Do you want to achieve flexibility, or do you want to become more sustainable? And different companies are at different maturity levels, even in the same industries, right? SMEs typically will struggle, and I completely agree with Brandon that many people do not even understand, how to use the data or how does data add value. I think having set goals, like saying that, okay, I want to increase productivity, so therefore I want to measure and improve my OEE in my manufacturing. And then you have a particular goal, then you know exactly where to look, and that's where visibility comes in. And I believe that visibility should be strongly coupled with also insights. I see the data, but what does the data tell me? How do I understand it? And then the control and optimization can eventually come. And that need not also be technology driven. I mean, you can use control and optimization through lean practices, through better operations. You can use technology to leverage, but it need not always be, at least from the SME side, it need not be driven by technology. You can actually have very standard processes, very smart people. We should not doubt our own intelligence as well to make things work. And you can definitely see value. But the main key is that we set our goals, we identify what kind of data we need, we try to understand what the data tells us, and then start taking corrective interventions. And I think that really adds value in that process.
Fantastic. Yeah. I think of all the panelists that have spoken here, the key underlying principle is you got to plan before you start. I think there's ultimately kind of it boils down to that. You can be a little bit different in terms of which terminology you want to use, but ultimately the idea is you need to sit down, you need to do your own homework, you need to plan out what is it that you're trying to achieve, what's going to be the outcome, how are you going to do this at a bite size, bit by bit, piece by piece, and then be able to roll this out. If you're going and jumping on for the sake of digitalizing, you're highly likely to end up making a misstep. You're going to be doing a lot of extra work without seeing any of the value. So without that goal in sight, without those things done in sight, it's going to be tricky. So plenty of ideas, plenty of options, things that people can do at home. The Siri program is one, value stream mapping is the other. These are things that are available online for folks to actually get going. Now, if we were to jump over to kind of the next stage of, we've done all the planning, we've done all these processes, what are some of the best kind of things to start doing as a first step after the planning is done? So are there certain tools that you've seen over and over again as usually a fairly common starting point of this whole digital journey. Have there been tools that you've gone across and that you've implemented yourselves or seen companies implement that has provided the best foundational layer to start moving? I'm quite keen to see what you've seen in the industry.
We have, in terms of digital transformation, we have been talking about the aspect of process and technology and ROI, and these are absolutely critical elements in terms of the success of the digital transformation. I'm still a firm believer of the people, process, and technology framework. And I think it all starts from the cultural change within the organization. We still see a lot of examples where you have the organization have done great digital transformation, and but in terms of adoption of the those initiatives, I think that kind of should be the measure of how successful digital transformation journeys are. And that is where from the very start, it is very important to engage the actual users or the folks who are going to be at the receiving end, right? And design thinking is one of the great tools that I think is a good starting point, where you get the different stakeholders together and understand how each of these stakeholders benefit is going to be addressed through that digital transformation journey. And you can have different stakeholders, like, for example, finance, your IT team, your executives, different roles within the executive team, but the actual users also, because at the end of the day, those actual users are the one who are going to be benefited, who are going to see the productivity benefit, or they're going to experience how their day-to-day job has transformed with this digital transformation journey.
No, that's a very good point. The highlight of actually people being a very sizable factor. And we've seen this happen quite often in situations where a particular manufacturer and the management team has been very gung-ho about deploying a particular solution. Maybe it's something around IoT sensors. Maybe it's something around putting in a cobot. Maybe it's something around adding in an AGV, right? All things and terminology that we deem as under the umbrella of Industry 4.0. But then maybe your people are not well trained yet. They don't know how to operate the equipment after the vendor has left. Maybe, for example, that, you know, when you're looking at the data, not everyone is actually following along and keying things in on time and actually recording things into a digital form on a regular basis. So the data is always somewhat obsolete. So it so much depends on people's reliance and actually using of this data before any of this actually becomes relevant. Otherwise, again, we're going back to the same thing as digitalizing for the sake of just saying we have it in a digital form, but not necessarily using it or being able to action on it or be able to sustain it in the long run as well. So I think that's a very, very critical component that you brought up there, which I think we cannot forget about. So even though after we've done all the planning, it's about enabling, including, and essentially giving someone the kind of the champion, the ability to drive these projects through and have them be embedded and invested into the project as well, is going to be pretty critical about what it's going to be successful or not. The solution is almost irrelevant in this case. It's really about how people will use it, because there's plenty of tools in the market already.
Absolutely.
So I would
Yes,
like
go ahead,
to offer some perspective that I get from Essential and all this. Yeah, basically there was a saying that Industry 4.0 is a transition stage. In fact, the objective of Industry 4.0 is to enable Industry 5.0. So this is something that I have heard of before, which I find that is quite relevant, because if we are looking at this one, right, what we are trying to do in Industry 4.0 is actually to create an ability that allows human to leverage and expand on, so that human has a lot more capability to handle the processes, the manufacturing and all this, without them doing it by themselves, right? So if you are looking at from this perspective, right, then I think one of the key solution will be on the visibility, right? So visibility is to allow the humans, even when you are not actually at the area, you can actually see wherever you are, whatever time you are in, and then also to understand beyond those simple information that are presented to you. So it's like you have a system that allows you to provide visibility and transparency of the situation so that you can make better judgment, better decision. So I think visibility is obviously one very important part. And the second thing is that's important for humans to leverage on is actually the status of your assets and the process, whether it's healthy, it is good or not. So like if it's having some problem, then maybe in this case you can take immediate interceptions or some steps to control the situation. Like for example, when your equipments are not working well, start to show some kind of degradation, then you should be able to realize it. So something we call the predictive maintenance, right? And when your asset is start to not use efficiently, not because it is slowing, but because of some coordination issue, then you should be able to start to understand this, and then after that take some action out of it. So I think this is another thing that we, as a human, we hope that the system can help us to do this, right? And then of course the last one is for me to take some business decision, I also need to have information. Like for example, am I going to be able to take in another 100 more units of order? Will I face some problem on the material shortage or resource shortage? Can I actually expedite my order or something like that? How do I make this judgment? So with this kind of industry 4.0 kind of data-driven information, I'll be able to make this judgment better. And then if I can do all this, then in this case, it will make my business much better and also my efficiency much better. Yeah.
Understood. Agreed.
So, so I think the question was more on, so if I understand right, company who's digitized, have digital data, what are some tools I can use to sort of get started, right? So, so, I mean, visibility is the first pillar that we talked about, right? So towards that, obviously people are very comfortable with Excel. So Power BI and simple automation tools, which can provide them visibility of information and not have to go through plotting the same charts or creating the same PowerPoints again and again, would be a pretty good step to take workout and still provide visibility in real time, I would say. And there are so many free soft, so now it's the robotic process automation, intelligent automation. There are so many free open source tools out there. So Power BI would be Power BI, Power Automate, and Microsoft is bringing so many tools onto the Excel platform itself, right? So it would be a very good place to start and building that dashboard. It could be local, it could be decentralized, it could be centralized, but starting there would be a very good starting point for people to sort of start looking, embarking on the journey.
Sounds great. Yeah, I think that's an important point. It's not about cost. It's about getting started with that whole digitalization process. There's plenty of tools out there that you can find. It's just about getting it and having someone dedicated to champion and to run it. So having the right culture in place to believe in the values that are being keyed into your Excel sheet, or believe in the values that are keyed into any other solution, and be able to use that on a daily basis.
Yep, and this takes workout, which helps them to do the next step. That's the point. I think if you don't do that.
So now, given that the information that we're trying to collect around the visibility aspect is about aggregation of data. Now, when we talk about data, it's a very broad term, right? There's data in terms of manual key-in, simply because there's no other way to collect it other than someone needs to observe the unit and then key something in. There is, of course, sensor data and IoT sensors, industrial IoT sensors, equipment that's already deployed with sensors in place. It's a mountain of data that's actually coming through. How have organizations been able to deal with, for example, validating that it's accurate? How are we actioning on this data to bring about value? What have you seen in the industry that people have been using to actually coordinate these things? But at the same time, what is missing? So for folks here that are looking into seeing if there's opportunities in this market, where do you see that this data is not being used well and should be looked at as well? So three-pronged question, feel free to look into this. One is around security and accuracy of the data itself that's being generated. That's one. Two is that of all the data that this is coming in, what has been folks in the field been doing with it? What has been successful use cases of using this data? And then last but not least is, what are some opportunities for our entrepreneurs here that are maybe in this call that would like to jump on this opportunity and say, there's a clear gap and I'd like to look into that? Abik, let's start with you.
Yeah, that's actually a very relevant question, and many people ask that. So one is in terms of how do you ensure that the sensors are working and the sensors are giving you the correct data and so on and so forth. So of course, if we look into it as a solution, one way would be to try to use redundant sensors. Like, are the two sensors saying the same thing, or are they, are they differing, and so on and so forth. And typically, as a sensor manufacturer, there are some guarantees that the sensor will always work within a particular, tolerance limit, right? So that is one. In terms of as a solution, what entrepreneurs can do and what is missing, I think sensors are available. Sensors to different types of sensing, whether it's sensing a runtime of a machine, or whether it's counting bottles coming out of a high-speed system. All these sensors are available. I think what companies typically look for are like, is this a viable solution, rather than just looking at a particular hardware or a particular software system. I think at the end of the day, manufacturers are looking at end-to-end solutions. Mm-hmm. And even when I say end-to-end, it need not be like a complete overall of the entire line, but maybe a particular segment, just to focus on a productivity of a particular machine segment or a particular module in the entire line. Or it could be like doing some kind of preventive maintenance action on a particular machine. Like, for example, if you do bottle making, high-speed bottle making, one of the biggest bottlenecks are essentially the blow molding machine themselves, right? And that's the source. So things like that. So I think organizations or manufacturers typically are really looking for, and this is one space which I find for mainly startups, is are they able to provide a full-fledged solution, and which eventually fulfills the organization's business objectives. And it need not be like financial, it could be like improving OEE or making sure that the machine doesn't break down at wrong times. Mm-hmm. I think those are the areas which are, I would say, the lowest hanging fruits and actually has the highest value add.
Right. I think one important thing that you mentioned here essentially is that it's that all-in-one kind of solution, which brings back up the word that was mentioned before about ecosystem. It's really very difficult for one company to solve everything under the sun, right? If you look at something like OEE, that's actually a combination of a lot of different things, right? Availability, performance, and quality. In order to calculate one value to see how well your equipment are doing, it involves that you have to have people maybe doing some manual inspections of processes, because maybe you don't have the equipment to actually be able to do that. Two is that you're going to have to digitize the lines, so you're going to need sensors that come in to do that. Three is that from a scheduling perspective, to see when the machine should be running, you need a different software to run that as well. So there's a bunch of different things that you need to link together. And ultimately, I think for a lot of folks that are looking to come into the Industry 4.0 space, is that it is not about a silo kind of operation. It's not about you closing the door and saying, I'm going to build the world's best sensor, or I'm going to build the world's best algorithm for something. It's always about that integration, because what the manufacturer needs at the end of the day is the whole line to run well, right? I don't want a siloed solution with just a sensor giving me values, but then nothing else. That almost provides me more work and more hassle and less likely for the project to be successful than if I went and got a maybe not as great of a sensor, but it's fully integrated, right? And it gives me everything that I need. So I think that's a very good thing. So I think folks who are looking into this, it's always about collaboration now. It's not about doing everything on your own. It's about looking at all the different players that are in the market and seeing what you can integrate together to provide that holistic end-to-end that will truly solve the problems that manufacturers are facing. So a great one that was brought up there.
So let me take a crack. So the first question on data quality, governance, security, obviously, just like how we monitor processes, I guess we should be monitoring data flows and quality regularly. Whatever we apply in terms of controlling processes and manufacturing, we do that to sort of control our data flows as well. and having the right owners, I think, to sort of respond to different problems is critical too. Because there could be a sourcing problem, which probably is an IT issue, versus actually the data is not the sensor problem, which could be like more on the operations side. Identifying the right owners for the data issues is critical, and to have the right governance structure. Of course, security is pretty paramount, and HP is quite big on security. So we have heavy security protocols, and in this day and age, I guess that's a pretty big vulnerability for most companies. So that's important. Use cases wise, I guess, what are some good use cases that can get big values? Of course, vision is a pretty classic one. I think most people gravitate towards that, automating human inspection. And leading up to the next question is actually the big pain point there is, of course, you don't have too much data. The algorithms are very data hungry. So how do you actually do a good job with the data we have? That's one thing. The second one is also to have a whole integrated workflow system of actually labeling the images, and actually providing feedback as to how the inferences are, and having this closed loop system for the solution is important. So that's quite lacking. And the related thing is the interpretability of the results. I mean, most of these algorithms are black boxes. So in providing an interpretable kind of solution is a pretty big opportunity in itself. Again, as you all know, that AI has these biases and so on and so forth. So having a proper interpretability is pretty critical and a big opportunity for entrepreneurs and outside companies.
Sounds good. Sounds great. Brandon, go ahead.
Maybe let me just add a little bit on top of this, because what I see is that a lot of people start to look at the smart manufacturing from the perspective of technology, but I believe this is actually quite dangerous, because having a technology without understanding the value of a technologies is actually a big problem, right? So in fact, data is the key. And that means Alibaba, this Jack Ma already predicted to say that data is the next currency, right? So there is a certain truth in this. So to understand what data can help is actually where the opportunity lies, right? It's like if we are talking about how to find the gap, that means between the current situation and the best scenario, then we should actually look at how data can be best used in all these scenario, right? This is actually important to analyze. And to use the data correctly, this is also a big problem, okay? I would like to use this simple word we call the fit for use, right? How to make sure that the data is fit for use. I think this is actually very important. And when we look at this further down, we see that the data quality is important. Data governance is also important, means that who actually has the responsibility on the data, right? Like for example, the responsibility to guarantee that the data is generated correctly, the responsibility to to make sure that the data is only given to the rightful user, and the responsibility that the data is used for the right value. Okay, so the fit for use, data governance is one part of it. And then we talk about the data management also, right? Those people who do not treat data management as a serious topic, then they will find that whatever use case they built along the way, it become no longer useful. Why? Because there are so many changes that happen, and there are so many kind of exceptions that can happen along the way. And then eventually you'll find that whatever things that you design for data become less and less valuable. And then it becomes a non-sustainable kind of initiative. And of course, finally, we also need to make sure that the data source itself is valid. A lot of people did not actually continue to visit the data source. Initially, they have a data source that are good for their cases. But as they progress, right, they will find that actually the information that they get is no longer represent the whole situation. So I think it is important for you to continuously verify whether your data source itself is sufficient to actually cover your objective. Yeah. So I think there was one question that was asked by the panelists to me on about how to provide the ROI for these cases, especially for the SME. I think the important point is to really look at your use cases to identify that the data that are going to be used for your use cases actually generate the strategic impact to your operation, right? It is actually important to realize that. And also try to explore whether this information will actually benefit to your others collaborative effort with your partners or even within your own organization, whether it actually can help. A lot of people start doing, for example, the predictive maintenance project. They didn't realize that actually the data that they have can help to reduce, for example, the inventory, right? They didn't realize that the data that they have can help to improve the logistic planning also. So a lot of these things actually can have added value to the information that you gather for your particular use case. So in order to justify this, you need to try to explore all the scenario across your enterprise process and see how you can gain the best value out of this. And then you can use this. Yeah.
Sorry, Brenda, just to interrupt here, because I think this goes back to what Priyanka was mentioning about how if you have the right culture in place, if the right people are actually reviewing and iterating through that data, they're going to be able to derive more value from it than if it was from the original expectation that you were setting up, right? Which is actually something that naturally, I'm going to jump into another question as we're coming close up to time. I wish we had a couple more hours to actually go through this. There's a lot of fun to talk about, but I wanted to address a few other questions that are coming up that naturally links to this. Is that in this scenario where even though I'm looking at one particular pain point that I'm trying to resolve, but in actuality, this pain point could resolve so many others, how then do I actually properly create a proper kind of business case? And have you seen examples, or have you helped clients and have helped folks go through crafting an ideal kind of business case or a story around why we should embark on this particular endeavor? How do you convince a board, for example, that we should deploy and train and bring in a brand new system to digitalize the paperwork that we're doing? How do you justify that? Because at the early stages, if it's just on a pure ROI, it may not always be obvious that you'll get that ROI right away. But were there some techniques that you've seen in your own organization or others that have nicely ironed this out to make a very convincing and strong case for a typical board that may not really know well about what Industry 4.0 is, but will then see the value and say, okay, we're going to sign off on this and proceed?
Right. I can try this because
go ahead, Abhi.
As a consulting company, I think this is a challenge which we face again and again.
Yeah.
I think and that is why it's very critical to link business objectives with Industry 4.0 objectives, right? It is very, very easy to blow up budget in digital transformation cases. It's probably the easiest thing to do.
This is coming from BCG, I can trust.
Yeah. So the idea is that we need to first identify, the objectives and why we want to do this, right? Again, it eventually boils down to whether we want to improve our productivity and therefore have business objectives set based on that, or is it to become more flexible especially in terms of niche manufacturing organizations, or for all mature organizations, is it a more like a sustainability program, right? But most of it till now is more about productivity increase. What is important is to actually show that given small steps and given looking at the least path of least resistance or the low-hanging fruits or whatever you call it, it is possible to actually build successful cases. It is possible to actually capture value. And it is also possible to utilize those profits generated out of that value creation to drive the next phase of Industry 4.0 digitization. And it needs to be combined, again, as I said, with operational practices or best operational practices like lean manufacturing or streamlining operations or smart sales and operations planning and so on and so forth. It need not always be technology driven. And that is why it needs a very, very clear understanding of what are the goals and what are the business objectives. Very high stress on what Priyanka has talked about people and culture. How do we ensure that there are right teams in place? Maybe it could be a SWAT team to initially show the value and then eventually train the remaining teams, and then actually unlock real, profitability in the organization. And that is something which will convince the board, and eventually show that certain pilots can be done, and through those pilots you'll be able to unlock further value, and it becomes like it's a pathway. It is not a one-stop shop. It's not a one-stop overall solution. It is step by step. It's like a roadmap.
Priyanka, go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to just bring in a couple of different perspectives. When we look at digital transformation, yes, there are certain elements like ROI, benefits, productivity, efficiency improvements that we look at. Ultimately, and I think Abhi covered in his what he shared, that ultimately the organizations have to look at from the perspective of what does it mean for their stakeholders, for their clients, right? What happens when something goes wrong? How many organizations were able to meet their KPI of on-time delivery during the COVID time, right? And it all goes back to the digitization or digital journey that we have been talking about, which is data transparency, data security, data availability. So that is one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is we have seen a lot of buzz around how the jobs are changing, what the future jobs are going to look like, and if the humans are going to be replaced by machines, right? But we also have to think about that there will always be a human element, and that is where the human machine model comes into the play, right? And when I say human machine model, this is today in most of the organization, if I see one of the recent study by McKinsey says that 30% of the time is spent in just discovering the data, finding where the data is. Now think about that. If that 30% of time adds to the people's time in making the decision, right? So then the people are coming to the table not with the data, but they're coming with the decision. They're coming with how organization can create a greater value and meet its goal and KPIs for our clients. So I think the perspective of looking at what digital transformation can bring also needs to have an angle of how that is going to help help the organization's SME talent to move to a higher value job. They're not looking at thinking about the data or consolidating the data, but they're moving to a higher value, which is they're participating in the decision making. And then how organizations can generate a value for clients, increase revenue, and also ultimately bring value for the stakeholders with this digital transformation.
Fantastic, fantastic. I think we have a little bit of time for one more answer, if there happens to be one.
No, I think they covered.
No. I think the folks have covered a great one here. I think again, this has been fantastic. One thing I just want to first off to do is to thank everyone for being here today. As we're coming down to the last couple of minutes, I want to go through just one quick, if viewer had an ability to just say within one or two sentences, for all the folks that are coming in to look at smart manufacturing, digital manufacturing as a potential career path, as a potential of a startup or a entrepreneurship kind of mentality here. What would you recommend that they do, ideally in one or two sentences? We'll go around really quickly if we can. Let's start with Priyanka.
I've been in this industry for almost 20 years, and I have seen two worlds, which is the technical and the business. And I think as we move forward, these two worlds needs to come together. So now everybody needs to become more like a techno-functional or business technical. And that needs to be a perfect combination, which is when the technical people are coming on the table, they understand what the business is asking for, what their pain points are, not just taking the requirements and walking away, that they asked me to develop this and I'm going to make this into a world-class solution. Yeah. And similarly, when business starts to understand the technology aspect of it, I think that's where a lot of trust starts to come in. if you are given an algorithm or a model, best machine learning model of the world, would you trust the output of it, or would you trust to use it with your business decision, if you don't understand how that works? So the transparency and understanding of the technical side is equally important. And I just want to take 30 seconds more, and this is where one of the programs that I have pioneered within IBM is called as Citizen Data Scientist. And this is one of the long-standing challenges that we face, is that we want to implement data science and analytics project, but then the understanding of business is more on the business side. But now when business starts to understand the basics of data science, they have a better appreciation of why do we need 18 months of data, or 18 months of data and 2 years of data for doing the historical analysis and coming up with the predictive model. So I think bridging the gap between these two is going to be extremely important for the success of the service providers, for the success of the organizations, and also for people who are looking at building their careers in this space.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Ashwin?
Yeah, so assuming I'm coming from a data science person standpoint, so assuming they have the technical skills, one area that I really have them sort of focus on is storytelling. It's a very underestimated skill, especially in the space. And the second one, of course, is more there are different ways, but design thinking, which is basically agile design thinking, all those things are very applicable in this context. So those are some two things I'll definitely add to your skill set, which will keep you, it will help you a lot.
Fantastic. Very valuable. Abik?
Yeah, I think for people who are willing to venture into Industry 4.0 and relevant work, it could be startups or new companies, whatever the case is, I think there is a huge potential to leverage the current ecosystem. There are lots of people who are there, and it's very easily accessible. I mean, LinkedIn is there. You can always reach out. Don't be shy to message. And I think that, and in general, I think I found people to be always, helpful for a one-to-one chat or even a phone call or whatever the case is, right? And yeah, there are enough resources available, and you can get the right kind of guidance. So I think just using the ecosystem currently is a very good way to start.
Fantastic. It's a leg up as you go along, so you're not prodding from the ground up. So fantastic. All right. Last but not least, Brendan.
Yeah, I find that instead of focusing on very fancy technologies solution, right? I think the industry are now lacking on this so-called onboarding solution, right? So it's like if you are looking at the food industry, looking at some of these maybe like CNC component manufacturing, I think a lot more of the times we need to onboard people into this. Okay, so try to look at those niche area where people can quickly take the solution, try it out, and actually immediately get benefit out of it. Okay, whether it's a subscription based, whether it is license based, it doesn't matter. But the key is that how to get people on board. I think there's a lot of opportunity in this area, right? It can be on the supply chain portion, it can be on maintenance portion or inventory management portion. It doesn't matter. How to get people jump on this easily. I think these are the things that are going to be very valuable for the industry. And also for the people who really want to develop it as their career, I believe the understanding on the data is very important, right? We need to know that data can be improved to become information, and then to become analytics, to become knowledge and expertise. How can we continuously improve the data value based on the context that are available? I think these are the things that will be very good topics to so-called like improve on. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. I have nothing more to add based on what these four experts have already told you. I think for folks who are coming in that are looking into the space, that are starting your own initiatives in your own organizations to try to drive digital transformation, you have gotten some great feedback in the past hour that we've had the ability to chat. So I want to thank again every panelist here for taking their time to give their expertise and guidance and hopefully motivation to folks who are on the journey or still chugging away on the journey or thinking about starting this journey. You now have the foundation in place, some more understanding, and also the resources to reach out to to be able to get started. So thank you everyone again for your time. I'm going to pass back to our organizers to help us close out as well. So thank you again, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Wilson, for your great moderation and a great wrap up of the event, and as well as your hard-hitting questions to our panelists. And Ashwin, Avik, Brandon, and Priyanka for sharing your insightful thoughts and perspectives on the various issues surrounding smart manufacturing and Industry 4.0 and the digital journey. The discussion has been very useful for me, and I'm sure attendees here benefit from the knowledge sharing, and hopefully you'll be able to contribute to the industry through innovation, onboarding, and their own talent as well. We do appreciate our viewers staying throughout the session and being interactive with all your questions for our speakers. We hope this conversation will continue offline, and do feel free to connect with us after the event. Do join our partner General Assembly for the last 2 Made in Singapore sessions happening later today and tomorrow, and also join SGInnovate in our upcoming deep tech sessions by clicking the links on the chat box. We hope to see you soon, and do look out for post-event EDMs to see how it is that you can connect with the ecosystem and connect with our wonderful speakers here, as well as to revisit the conversation if, to gather more thoughts for yourself. Yeah. So have a good Thursday lunch and the rest of the day. We hope to see you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.